Hey, Faith Community Church, it's Mike Lawrence, lead pastor. I got to tell you what a privilege it is to be pastor of not just the online community, but back up live in Hopkinton and live in Framingham. I'm talking with Pastor Dorian. The Framingham campus is doing awesome. People ask us, how is Framingham? Framingham's good, right? It's just so cool that we're able to come out of this pandemic and back into these different ways of bringing the gospel to people. So today's kind of special. We're finishing up a sermon in the series, What's Your Motive? Like, why do you do the things you do, especially your spiritual practices and in your relationship with people? But it's also the last of the series from the Sermon on the Mount. That section in Matthew's Gospel pulls together all these collected teachings of Jesus about how to live right with God and people. So, hey, we're winding that down and we're going to be jumping into some new stuff as the summer comes about. You know, throughout the whole pandemic, it's been kind of interesting watching the rise of the armchair investor. I mean, people who've just gotten into day trading. And it's been an amazing experience through this pandemic. It's like suddenly watching the stock market is like watching a sporting event. It gets kind of exciting and thrilling at times. I mean, since when did GameStop and AMC become such public words that we all pay attention to, like our favorite teams? We're rooting on people like Robinhood, literally coming along trying to stop corporate giants from undermining businesses and companies by surging in with private investors to come to their rescue. I mean, it's been dizzying watching it all play out. I got to tell you, I'm taking investment advice from sons in my family. My kids, my daughters, they're speaking to me about ways of investing funds. Suddenly, everyone can invest money into the stock market. The only thing that's been sad about this is that idea that the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. But you know, it does make me think, does Jesus ever give investment advice? I mean, think of the times we're in. We're always asking the question, does Jesus' teaching still apply to today? And honestly, I think it does. And I really think it applies during this season coming out of this pandemic with all the craziness that's been around the stock market. So here's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about investment advice from Jesus, the best securities for your future, and then I want to wind up by telling you a story that you will not soon forget, trust me. First, let me pray. So God, I'm praying right now that your spirit would walk into the homes of people, would fill their homes with your spirit in such a powerful way that those who are hearing, Lord, those who are watching, they would be changed in moments where suddenly they hear the voice of God speaking to them and they are never the same again. Lord, I want you to use me right now to do your will. God, I love you. And I believe your word is as important today as it was when it was first spoken. So please be a part of what we're doing. I love you. So know what Jesus says. Don't store up treasures here on earth where moths steal them and rust destroys them, where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moth and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. So here's the question. How will you invest your life? How are you going to store up your treasures? Now, you could invest in possessions that don't last, right? I mean, like you can put money into stocks or into an IRA, and you could buy a nice house, another house, or a better car, or you could upgrade to your tech. You can get new clothes, right? It's just you're putting your money into things that are important to you. You can invest it into a portfolio. But, I mean, we all know the truth. Houses age. They need maintenance. Sometimes they get too small as our families expand. Our cars rust out, and we have to replace them and sometimes upgrade them. And portfolios rise and fall. I mean, we've certainly seen a lot of that over the last few months, haven't we, in the investment world? You can invest your life into chasing things that are temporary, right? Things that are just not going to last and won't retain their value. But Jesus would say, invest your life wisely with vision. Look at Jesus says, store your treasures in heaven. And we know what he is not talking about. Jesus is not talking about your monies and your possessions, because you can't take it with you. I mean, if you go to the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, you can see an amazing collection of riches that were in the tombs of Egyptians who buried stuff with them to be able to take into the afterlife. And now here we are thousands of years later looking at them in glass cases. So we know he's not talking about that. And we know he isn't talking about buying your way into heaven because, come on, that would undermine everything else that Jesus is saying in the whole Sermon on the Mount about integrity and proper motives for your spiritual practices. What do I think Jesus means? He talks about your store up your treasures in heaven. What's the only thing that you can bring with you into heaven? Your relationship with God, your relationship with people. Relationships, the only thing that goes with you after you die. So here's a question, because you always have to think about your investments, right? How rich is your investment with God? Do you have one? Do you feel secure about your investment with God? Do you serve God, or do you want him to serve your needs? How much do you love him? How much do you experience and truly know that love? What about your relationships? How rich are your relationships? How abundant is your portfolio of relationships? I mean, how many relationships do you have in your life that you know are going to follow you into heaven? How many people are going to thank God because of your influence in their lives? How many people can say that you have made their life better? How many would say they're actually closer to God because of you? See, what Jesus is saying, this advice that he's giving is like, invest your life wisely with vision. Invest in things that will follow you into heaven, your relationships. But Jesus doesn't stop there in this section that we're looking at. He goes on to say, your eye is like a lamp that provides light for your body. When your eye is healthy, your whole body is filled with light. But when your eye is unhealthy, your whole body is filled with darkness. And the light you think you have is actually darkness. How deep that darkness is. Jesus is talking basic physiology. When you have two healthy, functioning eyes, you can see. Light makes a difference. You live in a world of light that guides your behavior, that shows you direction, that illuminates your life. But if one eye, even one eye, isn't healthy, suddenly that eye is caught in darkness and you can't see. You have no illumination, no direction and guidance through light. So what does this have to do with what Jesus is talking about? Well, we know this. The first church really associated Jesus with light. Matthew writes about it in his gospel. We studied this a long time ago in our journey through Matthew. He wrote this: the people living in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a great light dawned. The first church believed that Jesus was like light, that he illuminates our life with his teachings, and that if you could see the world through Jesus' perspective, if you could see the world through his eyes, you would have a light that would guide your life. They believed that. And so Jesus would say, follow good advice for your investments, for your life. This is why we're taking the time to walk carefully through the Gospel of Matthew to discover Jesus the way that Matthew knew Jesus. Because Matthew knew that Jesus will guide you through the darkest moments of your life. That even when you're facing death, Jesus brings a light to your life that you can follow to find hope. And they really believe, this first church, Matthew teaches that Jesus brings light to the hardest questions of life. Is there God? How do I know God? Who am I? What's my purpose for life? They believe that Jesus lit the path that led to the answer to those questions. If you follow Jesus' questions, you will learn how to invest your life in a way that produces meaning and purpose, and that will just infuse your life with joy and give you comfort, even in the most difficult of times. If you follow the teachings of Jesus, you're going to develop healthy relationships. You're going to find a security for your future that goes into eternity. If you invest in the teachings of Jesus, you're going to discover your Creator. And you'll know how to have a relationship with him. Jesus is teaching us, in this crazy, wealth-minded world, invest your life wisely with vision and follow good advice for your investments. He says even more. No one can serve two masters. You'll hate one you'll love the other. You'll be devoted to one, despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. We're all looking for the meme stock. We're all looking for that one stock that's just going to suddenly explode, like a GameStop or an AMC, right? You're going to get to ride it up to riches. And why? Because secretly we feel that money gives us security. And so the more money I have, the more wealth I accumulate, the more security I'm going to find. But Jesus wants to give us a warning that we should really trust the best securities. Trust in the best securities. Because Jesus is looking at two types of security. On one side is the security that we think we find in money, wealth, and possessions. Now, I want to balance it out. I mean, we all need money to pay the bills, right? And we should be storing aside money for the unexpected moments of life or towards our future. And we all need possessions. We all have to have homes, and we all have to have cars, and we all need to wear clothes. So there's a balance in what Jesus is teaching, because these things are important and they're wise, right? But Jesus is talking about when we put too much devotion into money for the security of our lives. Because remember, money, wealth, possessions, they don't guarantee happiness. If they did, then the richest people in the world would never get divorced. They'd have stable families, and they would never act or say anything embarrassing in public. But what do we know? The richest people in the world have families just as dysfunctional as ours, right? Don't trust in money to give you that type of security, because they're not reliable. Markets crash. Homes can be destroyed. Cars break down and get rusted. IRAs can just diminish like vapor on us. All these things will change. God never changes. His love endures. His faithfulness never changes. His power never diminishes. That he will never leave you and never forsake you. God's nature is eternal, so it never changes. It is reliable and secure. You know, there are people from all over the world, through centuries, who give testimony to how God's promises are reliable under all circumstances. In trusting and believing in God, his power and his faithfulness come through, and they have discovered God sweeping into their moments in critical points with answers to prayer that are just remarkable, because God is faithful. If you want to experience security, then invest into the source of it, God. And Jesus knows that money is going to compete with God for your devotion, because you know what the thing about money is? The more you have, the more you think you need. You never have enough. You know what? The more you have, the more you stand to lose, and the harder it is when you lose them. You serve wealth to get more, to keep more, to provide more, because we feel it gives our life security, and it gives us joy and pleasure, and it gives our lives meaning. But the thing that I've discovered is the more that people have, the less they feel secure, and the less contented that they are. It will drive you to serve it and not give you in return to the energy that you put in serving it. But here's the thing. God does want you to serve him. God does. Because he created you. Because he knows you. Because he truly understands what will give your life meaning and purpose. The creator of life has designed a way of life that is the most fulfilling, joyful, meaningful existence that you can imagine. I mean, serving God is aligning your life with God the way that God designed it. Think of it this way. All the members of an orchestra serve the conductor. And they're talented people. Each one of them is unique. And yet, when they come together, they take their uniqueness and they contribute it. And under the direction of a conductor, their one instrument joins with all the instruments and creates music so beautiful, so beyond their individual contribution. It's a powerful thing in following the conductor. The conductor draws out the best of them. He draws out the beauty in them. He draws out something that just gives joy to them and to everybody who listens to them. And that's what serving God is like. He's this grand conductor that will give your life security. And in doing so, joy and meaning. I mean, how do you know that following God will get you security? Jesus tells you, look to nature. I mean, you worried about your necessities? Birds are doing okay. Jesus said, this is why I tell you not to worry about your everyday life, whether you have food or drink or enough clothes to wear. Isn't life more than food and your body more than clothing? I mean, look at the birds. They don't plant to harvest or store food in barns, for your heavenly Father feeds them. And aren't you more valuable to him than they are? Can all your worries add a single moment to your life? You're worried about looking good, having the right clothes in a good fashion? Flowers don't seem to have a problem. Jesus said, why worry about your clothing? Look at the lilies of the field and how they grow. They don't work or make their clothing. Yet Solomon, all his glory, was not dressed as beautifully as they are. And if God cares so wonderfully for the wildflowers that are here today and thrown into the fire tomorrow, he'll certainly take care of you. Why do you have so little faith? Jesus is saying, invest wisely with vision. Follow good advice. Trust in the best securities. He's got one more thing to say. Look at everyone who finds out that you're investing money says the same thing. Find good relationships, good people with good advice that you can trust, right? I mean, when you're young, you want to find someone who's going to help you, maybe put away money that guides you to paying for college. When you get married, you want someone who's going to help you understand how to put aside money for the needs that you're going to have, maybe buy a house or get your kids through college. And as you grow older, you want to make sure that you have somebody who gives you wisdom about investing into your future. Well, why wouldn't you find someone that you could trust with your life and its investment? That's what Jesus says. Why worry about these things, saying, what will we eat, what will we drink, what will we wear? These things dominate the thoughts of unbelievers, but your heavenly Father knows all your needs. Seek the kingdom of God above all else and live righteously, and then he will give you everything that you need. If you really want to find security, if you really want to feel less insecure, like worry, then focus on discovering God. And line your life up with him. And what you're going to discover is that God's going to meet your needs. Maybe not your wants, but your needs. And sometimes by chasing your needs and not your wants, you're going to find less stress, less anxiety, less worry in your life. Because God's doing an alignment issue. If you can trust him like a father, and that's Jesus' invitation. That's we just know our Creator, but then we know our Creator as our Father. And maybe you don't have the best relationship with your dad, or you're missing a dad, but the point is, God is a Father that you really need and have always wanted. And Jesus wants to lead you into that relationship with God today so that you can have this security. Choose God today by following Christ now. And then you can begin to discover that freedom from worry that comes with the security of knowing God and having his love in your life. Listen, I told you I was going to tell you a story that you won't soon forget. So let me tell you this story. Because I've been blessed in my life by learning lessons around finance from some of the poorest people in the world. I've been to some of the poorest nations in the world, and for the last 3 years, we've been working with a number of churches in one of the world's poorest nations, Madagascar. It's in every top 10 poorest nations in the world list. So we partnered with some organizations to go over there and to invest into pastors, to do some training, because many pastors have never been to college or seminary, and they have no training about how to lead church. And so we come alongside, we teach them purpose-driven church teachings through a Malagasy cultural context, and we train up the pastors to train other pastors. It's been an awesome relationship, and the pandemic struck. And suddenly, our experiences in a Malagasy context erupted in life-threatening ways. Because, I mean, if they get the virus, they do not have access even to the most basic protection devices like a mask. Their hospitals are overrun. They have like less than a dozen ventilators for the whole nation. So a respiratory disease has a life-threatening impact in a poor nation like Madagascar in a way that's hard for Americans to understand. And where the solution in America was to work from home or to go home and to shut things down, you can't do that well in Madagascar, because then whenever they sent the citizens home and told them they couldn't work, that meant they couldn't eat. They couldn't make money that day to buy food for that day. And it became a balance of whether you contract a virus that will kill you or you starve from an inability to work. So with our connections, we decided to do a little food relief. We partnered with 11 churches, and we thought reasonably about what could we do, and we wanted to help these 11 churches feed about 650 people in their church. And so we sent the money to the missions organization we work with there. And they took the money and they purchased food, and then they gave it to the pastors. And we didn't put our name in. We let the pastors and their churches take all of the credit for it. And those pastors took that food and gave it to 650 people in their church. Here's where something amazing happened. Because they take their investment strategy from Jesus. And they learn to invest in what will last for eternity, to not worry about tomorrow, because they trust that God will take care of them today. And these people that were struggling to feed their kids, who said that the food that we provided was like manna from heaven, and who thanked us because they were worried about their children starving. When they got this food, it was such a blessing to them. They decided they're going to do what Jesus would do. And they took the food and they divided it up and chose to share it with people in the community as well. So that instead of eating as much as they possibly could, they ate a little less, they could give away more. In the money that we sent, the food that was purchased to feed 650 people ended up feeding like 2,400 people. That's like a 370% growth curve. That's a good stock investment, right? And those churches began to grow. Because the people that were being fed in the community wanted to know more about a church that would generously give away food during the time of a pandemic. 750 people gave their lives to Jesus Christ in these churches. 127 people chose to be baptized. And because they're purpose-driven churches like ours, well, you know what they did is they created small groups, because they understood that people get excited, give their life to Jesus, but then could wander off from that. Instead, they wanted to pull them together in small groups so they could mentor them to grow in their faith. And then because they understood the value of sustaining work, they're committed with us to go beyond just what we could do for today, but what we could change in people's lives. So we're developing programs of urban farming, and we're putting together savings and loans groups with microfinance, and we're doing startup business training and how to improve your business so that the work can sustain, but they're now impacting their communities because of their generosity, because of their investment strategy. You know, if you gave to funds like Neighbors Helping Neighbors in Madagascar, if you invested in the Global Outreach Fund, that's your investment. You know why I said relationships follow you into eternity? The way that you invested into these programs and touched people's lives, that will follow you into eternity. You are an answer to people's prayers. They may not even know your name, but they thank God for the gift that came, and God knows that that gift came from your giving. So thank you. So here's a question. How will you invest your life? I mean, go ahead, invest in your financial future, but know that money's not going to give you the security that you need. But it will demand more from you. How about investing into eternity by investing into Jesus Christ? When you invest your life into following Jesus' teachings that lead to the relationship with the living God, you know how you can live your life like Jesus says. Don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring its own worries. Today has enough trouble for its own. You can live without worry for the future, knowing that that future is in a loving Father's hands. Give your life to Jesus Christ today. You know what? There's an email address that's going to show up in the feed. Reach out to us so that we can help. We love you and we want to make a difference. So Jesus, would you please take this message from today into eternity. Would you help someone have the courage to invest in Jesus Christ? Would you help those, Lord, who have been trusting money to trust you? And would you open our minds to see the world through the eyes of Jesus Christ and to invest our life in such a way that we discover the joy and the hope and the comfort that Jesus promises. Amen.